All right. So, how are you doing today? Thank you so much for swinging by.
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day, and I'm happy to be here.
I'm so glad it's not raining. Everyone,
Too.
everyone in LA has been warning me, like this year, this winter, anyways. It's rained much more than normal, and obviously, this is my first winter here, so I have no range or
The baseline.
no, totally lost.
Well, the good thing is that we're not in a drought anymore.
Yeah, that is a good thing. Yeah, thank God for the drought. I mean, obviously, wildfires and all this craziness. We'd much rather have the rain, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how have you been? How's the start of 2024?
It's been exciting, actually. 2020, if we go back a little to 2023, that was the start of me taking longer extended vacations. I rode my bike across the United States. I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
All the way across the U.S.? Was that like a Forrest Gump moment where it was just like, I'm just going to go?
Well, with me, we talked a little bit, but because of my ADHD, that I'm always, if I hear somebody's doing something, I said, oh, that sounds great. I'll do that, without really giving it too much thought. But I did have a year to train, and I've been biking for many years, Ironmans and things like that, and different long distant rides. But this was an organized ride and only women were going, which I'd never done either before.
Oh, that's interesting.
It was very interesting. My younger daughter said, Mom, play nice.
Yes.
I'm so used to doing things on my own or, just training on my own and doing activities on my own. So being with the same group of women, and there was about 23 of us across the United States, we dipped our tire in San Diego. And then when we got to St. Augustine, Florida, we did that, in the other side of the United States. So that was pretty cool.
How many days did that take you?
It was 58 days. So that was the longest trip that I'd ever taken away from my practice and away from my family. And when I got back, it was strange because everything was the same. I mean, the only thing that was really different was my grandson's hair was darker.
And you were a totally different person.
I was a different person.
Yeah.
And my eldest daughter's been working in my company for probably 14 years, and she did such a great job. I thought, okay, 2024, I'm taking a lot of trips because she can do it. I've worked hard. I'm going to be 65. And so I thought this is a time for me where I can still do things that I want to do and take the time off from work and not have to worry about. Only thing is I do miss my grandkids, and I should say my husband as well.
Yeah, you can throw that in there too, maybe, yeah.
But overall, everything stays the same, as you probably know.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild. I mean, I was, traveling the world making adventure television for like a decade, and it's funny because you go, I would do about 8 episodes a year, so I would do 8 2-week expeditions. So I would do like 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off for 8 or 10 months. Okay. And yeah, like you have your friends and family, and then you leave them and you go off and have a crazy experience. It changes you for your life.
Right.
Like widens your perspective beyond all recognition. And then you come back a totally changed human being, and everyone's just doing the exact same thing. And it's really frustrating and difficult at times. And I think it really can, if you're not careful, actually having more of those experiences and more travel like that can really alienate you from family and friends.
That may happen in 2024.
It's a good goal to aim for. I think it's a great goal to aim for because too much of society, I think, is all about itself. I really feel like, we all care too much about, what the Joneses are doing next door and what family members say about, a 58-day trip across, the United States on a bicycle. You just have to tune it all out and go.
Well, and that's interesting that you say that because one of my neighbor I think he's 97 now, an incredible guy. His brain, he's just sharp as a tack, really. And I sat next to him during one of our functions recently. I had just gotten back from Cuba, and he said, Laurie, I've never met anybody like you. And I was thinking, really? Because most of the people I know are like me. So I thought that was interesting at 97. And I said, well, what do you mean like me? Because I wasn't quite sure what he was talking about. And he said, well, that you like to go on these adventures and you're gone for a long period of time. And I just was, it brought me back to my first 50-mile run that I did. And I brought my older daughter with me. It was on Catalina Island. And we had gotten there early, and we were sitting down, I don't know, having a soda. And I saw the next group of ultra runners getting off the boat. And I'm watching them. I said to my daughter, oh, this is a strange group of people. And she looked at me and she goes, Mom, you're one of them.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my gosh,
You just never identified yourself. Yeah. Yeah. It really changes you when you start like pushing yourself on a regular basis to get out of your comfort zone. And I find like it really differentiates, it really trims down like who your friends end up being and which family members you end up spending more time with, because not a lot of people are really want to hear about all these stories or can even kind of empathize with the, what you're going through to train or what it took to actually complete these adventures, right?
Or to even survive the country.
Or even survive, yeah.
I mean, that's also, and I think, this last trip to Cuba, the last trip that I took, was really, I was so immersed in the culture and the education part of it that it wasn't just about the exercise, the cycling, although I love the cycling. And I would always ask for extra miles every day. And I would get a couple of women that would join me, which was really great because they were fluent in Spanish. But it was more than that this time. I really walked away with a feeling of getting to know them more on a personal level and what they went through. And it was a great trip.
That sounds amazing. Okay, so you gotta go into this, because the only thing I know about Cuba, I've never been. It's on my list, but the only thing I know about Cuba is what I've seen in A Few Good Men with Jack Nicklaus and Colonel Jessup at Guantanamo Bay. And obviously that wasn't even filmed in Cuba, so I know absolutely nothing about the country.
And when I went there, I knew nothing about it either. All I knew was you should bring some extra clothes or medication because they don't have any.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought to myself, oh, you know what? I have extra shirts because we have a annual fundraiser every year in my son's name, and we can talk about that later. But all the money goes to Children's Hospital, and throughout the years, this will be, I think, our 38th or 39th year. We give out really nice T-shirts, long sleeve, sun protected ones. And so I thought, I'm going to bring about 40 brand new shirts, and I'll give them out when I go there. I didn't know how much it meant to them to get a brand new shirt like that. And I wish I would have just taken a whole suitcase and given them that, whatever I could stuff in there. And if I ever do go back, I would do something like that. So that was really cool. And then our guide, one of the guides who was a history professor, he just was so informative and knew everything about Cuba. I was reading a book, An American History of Cuba, written by a Cuban woman, and it took her about 10 years to write it, and it was very, very interesting. But I would ask him questions pertaining to what he was showing us and what was in the book, and he finally said, Laurie, how do you know so much about all this? And I said, well, I'm reading this book, and I told him, and it's like as big as the Bible, and he said, can I have that book? And I said, of course you can have that book. I felt good just to give him the book, because who knows if he could have gotten it there.
No, definitely not.
Right.
Yeah.
So and it was interesting to get his perspective, because his mom was 15 during the revolution in 1961, and he was born in 1971. So he was indoctrinated to hate the U.S. And really didn't get the full perspective of things until he was in college.
Yeah, communism is a strange beast when all media and stuff like that is closed off to the outside world, and people really do kind of like grow up in this innocent, naive bubble that, communism protects them in, especially when all the communication with the outside world is closed off. Because I lived in China for 18 years, and I saw that as well, right? Like, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, X, all these social media platforms where people connect and share experiences and things like that were totally off limits. And there was a gap there of a few years before the Chinese tech entrepreneurs built their own versions of Twitter and YouTube and things like that. So there was a gap there where there was no connection. The internet was thriving and everyone was using Facebook, I guess, back in, 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Right.
But the Chinese didn't have anything else. And actually, Facebook was available in China for a while. So was YouTube. But then they got really hardline and blocked it all. And then you can see how over the last decade, the Chinese people just don't really get what's going on in the rest of the world because they're only getting their media from inside China.
And you think about, too, another way, if you look at that from a different angle, is that, in 1961, when there was the revolution in Cuba, which really wasn't that long ago, and then you had the Cuban Missile Crisis, there was no social media. So we didn't really know what was happening. We only had to go by what the news channels were telling us. And so I find that interesting. And we were kind of, especially in my era, were indoctrinated to to dislike communism or communist countries and think it's all bad, when we really shouldn't be judging anybody and not divide it even further. And I feel like Cuba's just gotten the short end of the stick all the way around.
Yeah. I mean, communism countries are nice to travel in. I mean, and the people are lovely. As you said, like you met some wonderful people in Cuba and stuff like that. But I don't know, communism just has kind of underserved the economic opportunities.
And they see that, but what can they do? I mean, they still have billboards in Cuba with a huge picture of Castro, and it says socialism or death.
That's awesome.
So, the guides really couldn't even talk to us openly unless we were off the streets, because they didn't want to be reported and they didn't want things taken away. Most of the tour guides, we met a couple of them along the way, were lawyers, doctors, engineers. They all left their jobs because they make no money, so they went into tourism instead.
How crazy is that you can't make a job in Cuba as a doctor or a lawyer or a professional, and then you have to go into being a tour guide just to make a bit of money, maybe get some US dollar tips, and just, it's crazy.
Yep.
Yeah. So, okay. So can you, as an American living in the United States, can you even fly directly to Cuba now?
It's actually pretty easy. I just flew from California to Florida and then Florida to Cuba, and you have to apply for a special visa to get into their country, but it's really easy. You can do it online or you can get it right at the airport. It's just like $100 more at the airport, but you can do either way, and it's easy. They really want tourism. I mean, they are like, tell your friends to come to Cuba. Tell everybody to come to Cuba.
Yeah. I wonder if they're ever going to open up that country and let it kind of go through its like full evolution of potential.
Well, so the guides that we had, they were both the same age, but they were raised, and one was raised more in a village and the other one was raised closer to Havana, and their perspectives were different on it. The one from the village said, and he's probably more correct than the other one, he said, there's too much of a gap. All the wealthy Cuban people fled the country, and their kids, they haven't experienced what we experienced here, and there's too much of a gap. They're not going to want to get involved with the Cubans here. Where the other guide believes that the wealthy Cubans that left are going to come back and save Cuba.
Oh, that's ambitious.
And I didn't want to say anything, and I'm just thinking, God, wouldn't that be nice? But
yeah, I mean,
the reality of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if Cuba is going to change, it has to, it has to change from inside, right? And maybe there's outside money coming in or something like that. But at the end of the day, like living in Miami as a Cuban is not that bad.
No, not. I mean, you think of it, they have blackouts every single day. You don't know when they're going to be. They're rolling, so it can happen any time of the day. The only people that don't have the blackouts are the ones that are funded by the government, which are the hotels that the tourists are staying in.
Well, this might surprise you, but I was traveling in India a few years ago, and this was back in like 2012. I did a motorcycle trip all around India, and that was incredibly dangerous. But I remember staying at 5-star hotels in Delhi, and they had to have their own generators because they would have rolling blackouts as well.
That's what this is. They had to have their own generators. I was talking with somebody actually who did a motorcycle trip in Cuba and had a great time, but it was, I want to say 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But they do have motorcycle trips there as well, I guess.
So how did you plan this cycling trip across Cuba? Because, I mean, this is something that just sounds amazing. I would love to try to do something like this at some stage.
Well, it was with that women's tour again. They all of a sudden, they decided they opened up this new tour. There was only a second time they'd done it. A few weeks before they did the first trip. And so I thought, you know what, I'll go with them because Cuba's open. It works out great in my schedule. It's something I want to do. My friend was going, so we could room together. And I thought, well, this is a good opportunity. But what another gal and my friend said, hey, we're going to go scuba diving. Do you want to get your scuba diving license? So this was back in October of 2023. And we'll get there a few days early and we'll scuba dive and there's caves we can explore. Wow, that sounds great. I don't have my scuba diving certificate, but I'm going to work on that, which was a big deal for me because I don't remember what year it was. It's kind of weird when you get a certain age. But I think it was about 10 years ago. I was crewing a friend that was doing the Badwater race have you heard of that?
No, I haven't heard of it.
So it's a 135-mile run. It starts in Death Valley, California, on your way to the Sierras. And you go up to Whitney Portal Road, which is, I think, 8,000 feet elevation.
Yeah, that's on the way to Mount Whitney, which is the highest mountain in the southern 48 states, right? It's about 14,000 feet.
14,500.
Yeah.
So, and there's also another one that's called Langley. So if you ever want to do that, it's easier to do. I mean, not to do, but it's like 300 feet less or something, and the views are spectacular. It's a much prettier hike.
Amazing.
But that's for another time. Anyway, I ended up getting pulmonary edema, and I didn't know it. So from the altitude. So I came back down.
That's incredibly dangerous.
It was I almost died. Yeah. So it was right before an Ironman. I came back down. I thought, I'm not feeling very good. Well, obviously my lungs were filling with fluid, and I didn't know it. So I think I'm going to go for an ocean swim. So I went for a swim, and I'm out in the middle of the ocean with my friend, Laurie, and I said, there's something wrong. I can't breathe. It sounded like somebody was blowing into a straw every time I was breathing. And she said, oh my God, Laurie, your face is so white. I said, I don't know what's happening to me. Well, I was dying, actually. My lungs were filling with fluid.
And this is while you were in the ocean?
Yes, in the ocean.
What a terrible place for that to happen.
Yeah, it was awful. But I have to say, I think because I had lack of oxygen to my brain, I was very calm. And I just kept dog paddling, and there was people fishing off the pier. And I would look up at them and I would say, well, maybe they'll jump in and save me. Well, how are they going to do that? They don't even know there's something wrong with me. Laurie left me. I didn't know she went to call for an ambulance, which she did. And then 2 men came out and saved me. They brought me back in, and they thought I was having a panic attack. And I said, I just want to lay down. And thank goodness they said, no, you can't lay down. If they would have laid me down flat, I would have surely died. But anyway, the bottom line is I ended up being saved. The ambulance came. They took me to the hospital. They got the fluid out of my lungs. But since then, I hadn't really been able to do a triathlon competitively because I would get major panic attacks in the water, which is odd because I'm a therapist, and you would think that I would be able to overcome that. And I finally did this last summer. I was able to surf again. I signed up for diving, which we got back into the diving, which is huge for me. So to be able to overcome that and to go 60 feet under the water was huge. It wasn't that it was that spectacular under there. It was pretty cool. It was like walking on the moon. But for me, it was to overcome that fear of going in the water and learning how to do something like diving. And I'm back to surfing again, which is really cool because I couldn't even do that for years.
That's wild that one experience kind of destroyed your entire comfort level in the water.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm back.
That's good. And did you go scuba diving in Cuba?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. I went scuba diving, and they were so nice there, and the water was warm, not like here in California where it's, where I live, it's like 63 degrees of water.
Yeah.
I probably will never go scuba diving there.
That's cold. Yeah.
It's too cold.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the guys that do those like Blue Planet TV shows on Netflix and stuff, like with David Attenborough, and they do these like deep sea scuba diving under the Arctic or under the Arctic sea ice or around Antarctica?
A little bit of that, but I don't think I would want to do that.
Well, these guys are in these cinematographers, male and female. They're in like spacesuits because it's so freezing. Yeah,
I can't even imagine.
Well, because salt water can go below zero, so salt water goes below zero without freezing, right? Like fresh water, when it hits zero, it freezes. But salt water has to go much colder, not much colder, but a little bit colder, I think, before it actually freezes. So you can be down there, and without all that protective equipment.
They can stay down there because that seems horrible.
I'm sure they're loving it because they're getting to shoot seals and, dolphins or whatever's down there. But yeah, I'm wondering, like, when people have to tap out, like whether it's 10 minutes or a half hour or an hour, like how long can you actually, exist in that environment with so much artificial things keeping you alive, let alone the air that you have to.
Yeah, it sounds. I'm gonna stick with the tropics for now.
Much safer. So that's great. So I mean, obviously you're a therapist. You've done some interesting work there around mental health. I'd love to get into that. You love to travel. You're incredibly adventurous. Maybe we can interweave something in there as well. I've done a lot of fun trips. Happy to share. But I mean, I really want to kind of understand like more about you.
Okay.
And then we can kind of build into that. So where are you from originally?
Well, I'm originally from California.
Okay.
From the Valley. I'm a Valley girl originally. And
so you grew up being outside all the time?
Yeah, I think I did. Well, back in the day, it's like, okay, we'll see you when it gets dark, come home. Okay, see you later. So I was off, and I had an older brother. I still do. He's 15 months older than I. And if I wanted to hang out with him, I had to keep up with him. So he's the one that kind of got me into being a tomboy, so to speak, made me rough around the edges, because if I wanted to play football or baseball or tag or ride bikes, I had to keep up. So I thank him for that.
That's a good an older brother, keeping you kind of in the loop.
Yes. Yeah. Until we were teenagers, and he wanted nothing to do with it, which is fine.
That happens. So what was it like growing up in Southern California? I mean, it's pretty lovely here for the most part.
Well, it is very nice. Unfortunately, I came from a home that was very dysfunctional. My mom was an alcoholic and drug addict. So my mom left our family when I was young, and it was just my dad raised the three of us, and we really didn't have much money. So that was an interesting childhood growing up. My dad was a great guy, very loving. He would take us to the beach all the time. He wasn't an avid hiker, but he taught us how to play tennis. So he was an outdoors guy, athletic type guy. And that part was good. But, just that whole upbringing of having that dysfunctional family kind of does something to you, that's for sure.
I think it leaves its mark, right? Definitely.
Smart.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I never really dealt with as a child or even in my early adult life. And my husband and I met him when I was 19, moved in 3 months later. We got married, and we're still together.
Oh, well, that's amazing.
Yeah. I know. How lucky is that?
Coming from where you came from to have like a loving marriage that's lasted that long, I think is pretty rare, right? Because you definitely had some childhood trauma.
Oh, it's awful. And I think any relationship is hard, but I think that we were both so young, the fact that we were able to stay together and grow together. And my husband's just been so supportive of everything. I said to him, because I'm going to go do the Camino Santiago, which is a 500-mile hike from France to Spain. And I said, come on, you can join us. Because I cannot and don't want to hike 15 miles a day. I just don't want to do it.
Yeah.
I said, okay.
Fair enough.
Yes. Okay, well, then I'll see you in 6 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, if you don't want to come out and walk, you got to stay behind and hear the stories, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing though. That's wonderful. So I mean, what was it like, being a teenager with two siblings and a single parent kind of trying their best?
Yeah, we were like feral cats, really. We were just wild. I mean, that was about it. No parent really wanted their kids to hang around us.
That's funny.
Oh, no, you can't go to their house. There's no supervision. Well, why do you think everybody's here?
Oh.
But
you guys were like the black sheep of the neighborhood because you were totally free, right? Yeah.
And they, but our neighborhood understood. Nobody talked about anything back then. They all probably knew about my mom. I mean, they could see her, causing havoc, running down the street and yelling, but nobody ever mentioned it. So I guess that's a good thing. That's a nice thing.
Yeah.
But I transitioned from that to being married moving in at 19, got married when I was 21, had Jackie when I was 22. Then I had a son. We had a son together, and he died on his second birthday.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, so there we go. Here we have another tragedy, right?
Yeah.
And
what was it like dealing with those two tragedies so close together? I mean, it must have been devastating.
It was awful. Watching your son die of cancer is probably, I don't know if it's the worst thing. I'm sure there's other things, but for us at the time, it was pretty horrific. He was completely fine up until about 2 months before his second birthday. And then we didn't know it, but he had a tumor in his stomach that actually crushed his spine, and he went paralyzed. And by the time they found everything out, he died like 2 weeks later. I mean, we spent so much time at Children's Hospital. We lived there with him. And I didn't really deal with anything until after the fact. While I was in the hospital, I noticed how other families were really suffering. I mean, it would rip families apart. And we were so fortunate to have a close family with my mother-in-law, father-in-law, and my dad, that I thought I have to do something to help these families. And the local coach at the college, at the junior college, he had asked me to run for them before.
Okay.
Started running right after my daughter was born. And I said, no. And then he asked me again, and I thought, you know what, screw it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to run, even though I was a horrible student, because I wasn't even diagnosed with ADHD until I was in my 50s. So I barely graduated high school.
So you were married and had 2 kids. Your son died before his second birthday, and you were also in school at that time.
No, I didn't start until right after he passed away.
Okay.
Then he died just like a week after his second birthday. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to go run for the college. I'm going to try it. And what I did was, because I finally found something I was good at, running. I was horrible in school, but I was placing in all these races. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to apply the same techniques I use for training for a race, how you win the races, and then you go backwards to where, what mileage you have to do, what you should be doing. And that's how I'm going to study. So if I have an exam or I have a paper that's due, I'm going to start working on it. And I ended up graduating valedictorian from the junior college.
Oh, congratulations.
Going to UCLA, then I got pregnant with Jessica, so I graduated from UCSB, got 2 masters, have my own company. I mean, who really would have thought?
Yeah. It's interesting, though, that you gravitated towards running to deal with the loss of your child. I think that's
exactly what happened.
Yeah, because I think, it's hard not to run into people who have dealt with trauma in their life these days. It just seems to be everywhere, as whether it happened in early days or whether it happened during COVID or something like that. Everyone's kind of suffering from something in their own way. And it's amazing how a lot of people have gravitated towards running because it's very meditative. It's a space that they can control. It allows their brain to kind of drift away, and you're not being constantly bombarded with other people's ideas or thoughts, and you're in your own space. And of course, exercising is the best in general, I think, for everything. So it's nice that you found that outlet.
It's probably saved my life in more than one way. I'm sure my mom had ADHD, and unfortunately, she turned to alcohol and drugs. And then, I turned to sports, which is great, and I know my brother has it too. But he has his own business and he's successful.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. I think if you can channel it the right way. The running, though, I brought my jump rope to Children's Hospital, and I would go out on the patio area where families, a lot of the parents would be smoking cigarettes, and I'd just be jumping rope, for however long I could before I had to go back into the room again to be with my son. So that was my outlet for many, many years until I went to graduate school, and they told me in graduate school, hey, if you go to therapy, you'll get, all you have to do is go for 10 hours and you get 100 hours counted towards your degree or whatever it was, your clinical hours. And I said, oh, sign me up, I'll go.
So that's when you started thinking that therapy might be for you.
Well, that's just actually, no. Prior to that, as soon as I got my bachelor's degree and my daughter was just born, and I ran into somebody that I went to junior college with, and she said, we're hiring at this company to work with kids with developmental disabilities, doing behavioral therapy. And I thought, well, I've never worked with kids with developmental disabilities, but I know how my son Jacob was treated when he was in a wheelchair, and I would take him for walks. People wouldn't even look at him because I don't know why. They're just uncomfortable. People are uncomfortable. So I thought, I'm going to try that population. And I fell in love with working with adults and kids with disabilities. And to branch off on my own and have my own company, I had to get my license. So I thought, I'll just get my license and become a marriage family therapist without ever having gone to therapy myself. But then I did go to therapy, and that's when I started having my first panic attacks.
That's interesting.
Because I was dealing with everything for the first time. Yeah. But it was helpful. I was able to work through some stuff and use some of their strategies and move on with my own practice.
Wow, that's amazing. That's such a journey you've been on.
It's so weird, isn't it? I mean, it just kind of morphed into this without... Obviously you've unpacked a lot of very heavy information to me, and I don't want to pretend anything is more important or less important than anything. Yeah. But it's very interesting to me that you at the age of 20 figured out you had some learning disability, and no one even questioned it. No. And then all of a sudden now, everyone has ADHD. I know. Isn't that strange?
It's so strange. I think just back then, no one cared.
No. And I know, I think about it now, I have parents that come in and, can you work with my child? Their grades are bad. Their self-esteem is bad. They're being shamed. And I feel like, oh, that was me, except nobody did anything. I was just sent to the principal's office all the time and kind of pushed along through the grades. And I said, yes, I can help and I can empathize with you. And I think that's kind of what sets things apart. Also in our practice, we use 2 different modalities of therapy, but also the fact that, I can identify with somebody who's in a wheelchair, somebody that has a developmental disability. I had a son that passed away, so I can empathize with you. I think that accounts for something.
It does. I mean, there was no empathy 30 years ago.
No. No, in fact, I didn't get diagnosed till I was in my 50s. I came out of a meeting, and what happened was I was presenting at a meeting, and this was when before my second master's, and I look out the window and I said, I said, "Oh my gosh, look at the size of that squirrel!" And everybody looked at me like, "What is she doing?" But it's just my attention just is like that. And so when I left, one of the psychologists said, "Laurie, have you ever thought about medication?" And I said, "Well, why would I do that?" And he said, "Well, because of your ADHD." And I said, "ADHD?" So I got out my DSM, because I have one. I'm a therapist. And I'm reading it. And I said, "Oh my God, this is me. They could have a picture of me in this book."
And you didn't figure that out until your 50s?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I had come up with my own way. I was already working with people like saying, "Okay, you need to have scheduled times. This is how much time you're going to work on something. Then you're going to take a break and you'll do like some type of sensory, whether it's doing push-ups, folding laundry, and then you come back to your work."
Yeah. Constant breaks. Yeah. Just, get away in different headspace and then come back fresh, right?
And come back fresh, because some people can sit there all day, but if you have ADHD, you're only going to you have to find out what your threshold is and how you can be productive.
Yeah.
What that time frame is.
Yeah, I mean, I think, working in 1 hour bursts and doing like 50 minutes of work and then taking that 10 minutes and doing some push-ups or jumping rope or going for a walk around the block or going to get a coffee at the shop next, down the street or whatever, like just those little breaks where you can give your brain some space and then you come back to something fresh is so important.
It is.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. I grew up in athletics, so I grew up training. So I was a college level basketball player.
Right.
And I was okay. I was pretty good for a while, and didn't get to play professional. So that's always the caveat. But it was amazing how much playing sports helped me shape the time and the schedule and the studying for the rest of my life. Because having those fixed 3 or 4 hours a day of training, and then also having to plan your whole life around those fixed things, and then also being exhausted all the time, really helped me study. Because I didn't have the angst or the energy or the buildup inside me to go out and do things or to meet other people or to do things that maybe, or to engage with people in different ways, because I was exhausted all the time. So for me, studying was really easy, and I could sit for hours and just study because I was exhausted.
That's
with all the training. Yeah. Totally different end of the spectrum.
Yeah, but at the same time, you were using a schedule to train for your basketball and how do you fit your studying in. So in a way, you were structured, but you didn't need, I'm a very visual learner, and a lot of my clients are visual. So it's important to have something in front of us where everything is written down and you can check it off and you can see you're making progress.
I used to have one of those like paper like schedules for the week or for the month on my thing, and I would even be scheduling in like sleep, like extra sleep during the day. Like if I didn't have a class and then my practice was at like 4 p.m. or 6 p.m., then I would have an afternoon nap to try to sleep before I go to practice. And then when I came home from practice, I would try to do some homework, but you never knew what would happen in the evenings, if you'd have energy or not. And then the next morning you try to get up as early as you can to finish all the stuff. And it was pretty fun. It was pretty fun planning all it out. Yeah.
But your life is probably similar now to where you're scheduling your fun activities around your work schedule or vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So 2019 was probably like peak me, as the way I like to describe it, where we did 10 expeditions in 10 months in 10 different countries. And I produced, directed, and hosted that show. It's called Expedition Asia. So we did all that. And then in between that, I did a little bit more than 40 speaking events. So I was able to plan out these 2-week chunks where we would go out and climb mountains or walk across deserts. So similar stuff like what you like to do. And then I would come back into the real world, and then I would, be engaged with family, friends, and then speaking events, and be traveling all around the world for speaking events. And it was so much fun, working in those blocks and having those fixed dates, and then having other things to slide in, and then getting to meet just some amazing people as well. So it was really, really a great year. And then of course, COVID kind of set all that off in a totally different way. And it's been kind of devastating work-wise. But now we're kind of getting back into it and coming back to LA as part of that rebuilding process. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. COVID really affected, the mental health, which, I'm in. And so that's really, it really impacted us as well because, thank goodness for telehealth, right? Because some of our clients were afraid, or they lived in group homes, the ones with developmental disabilities, were in group homes where we weren't allowed to go in, or sometimes we'd sit outside. So I still sent my staff out to see clients. So sometimes we would sit outside. They'd always wear a mask. They followed all the protocol. But it was so important for these individuals because the ones that live in group homes and a lot of the adults with developmental disabilities, they'll either go to work. Well, they weren't working then because they were sent home, or they would go to day programs. So the day programs would have activities for them. They'd take them out in the community. They'd do fun things. Well, that stopped. So now they're isolated. So they have no interaction at all except for the other people that live in the house. So it was important for us to go out there and have that contact with them.
That interaction is so important, isn't it?
It is. And I started to get a lot more students, neurotypical, I guess is what they're called now. They're always changing the terminology, but neurotypical. And they would come in with a lot of anxiety or body image, because a lot of them spent a lot of time on social media. So now they're developing, body dysmorphic disorder, which is that they see themselves not perfect. Well, that's because nobody's perfect.
Nobody is perfect. That's the truth. Yeah.
But try to tell a teenager who's trying to fit in, and everybody's posting pictures of themselves all the time. So it was devastating for a lot of families.
Yeah, I can't imagine like having children, having, people that you're trying to grow up and teach about the world, and having them stuck on social media feeling terrible about themselves. Yeah.
Very sad.
It's kind of like just normal now, isn't it? It's just what you have to deal with, and it's just it's picking the weaker kids apart because they just don't have the self-esteem or the tools to deal with those interactions, and there's a lot of bullying on social media as well, which is terrible.
We're going to find out later just how bad it probably was for that age group. And then there's always the question of, well, when do I give my kid a smartphone, or when do I let them on the internet, or when do I let and it's all about moderation too. I mean, I have grandsons, one who just turned 9 and the other one is 6.5. And the 9-year-old does not have a phone, and I don't know when they're going to give him one. I hope it's not for a while. But there are 7, 8, 9-year-olds that do have cell phones, and the parents will say, well, I'm a working parent. Well, why can't you just get them a flip phone? Why do they have to have an iPhone? Why do they have to have access to the internet?
Take them back to the Motorola days and the old Nokias, those brick Nokias that we used to have. I mean, I'm thinking about even going back to those because I'm so tired of being tracked. And, I'm so tired of having dinner with friends and talking about, climbing a mountain in Kenya, and then the next day waking up and just seeing Kenya mountains on Instagram, as part of the feed. Your phone is always listening to you. It's always tracking you.
Is that? I know it's so strange when things like that happen.
It's all in the terms and conditions in the apps. The apps are completely following us. So you give the app permission to use a microphone. So say you've got Instagram or WhatsApp, right? Like a Meta Facebook company.
Right.
And you give it permission to access your microphone and your speaker because you think, I need to be able to send voice notes to people. But then actually what you're allowing it to do is listen when the app isn't even open. And then it listens to that, and then it feeds you advertising based on that. And it's all in the terms and conditions. And TikTok is by far the winners on this, and of the listening to you when the app's not open and feeding you ads that fit your lifestyle or fit whatever you've been talking about. But I tell you, go home tonight with your husband, have dinner, and say, okay, tonight we're only going to talk about Argentina.
Okay.
And just talk about Argentina for 20 minutes with both of your phones, right, like that. And I promise you, tomorrow you will start seeing advertisements from Argentina. I'm
gonna try it. By the way, I loved Argentina and Chile.
Oh my God, I love Argentina. I climbed Aconcagua a long time ago. The 24,000 foot peak down there. We made a whole episode about it. I love Argentina.
To look at it.
Yeah. South America is the best.
That's what I think that was comparable to the Sierras, really. Because I went to Peru. Peru was beautiful, although I was really sick. I got a parasite, but it was beautiful, and I loved looking at ancient history. I love history.
Did you go to Machu Picchu?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we climbed up there. I would drag myself out every day, and then I'd just come back and fall apart. But I thought, this is gorgeous. There's a lot of history. But you know what? Sierras are just magical. Mm-hmm. There is something about them. And I really hope that you get to do the JMT, the John Muir Trail, someday, because I think you're going to find the same thing.
Yeah, no, I've loved it. One of the reasons why we haven't explored the United States as much as we would like is actually because it's so difficult to travel in the backcountry of the United States, because the backcountry of the United States, it all belongs to someone. There's like, there's no empty land where people haven't, put up a fence or something. So you've got national parks, and the John Muir Trail mostly goes through national parks. And then everything else is like private land. So it's like, okay, if I want to go and have a 10 or 12 day hiking trip, I have to go through a variety of national parks. Okay, so what does that mean? Okay, so if I want to film and make an episode of TV, I need to do all these permits. You're not allowed to fly a drone because of wildlife. And then the worst thing is we travel with about 300 to 400 pounds of camera equipment.
Oh my gosh.
So cameras, batteries, tripods, some small lights in case we're doing things in the evening. And if you're filming in the United States, you need to hire porters, like actual people to carry that stuff.
Or donkeys.
Well, no. So in the national parks, you're not allowed to use you're not allowed to use livestock and things like that to commute. But in Peru or Chile or Argentina, you load up your donkeys. Or in Tibet, when we filmed in Tibet a long time ago, like we had yak, right? And we would load them up and they would carry all of our equipment. Or we walk across the desert, we use camels. So in developing countries and even third world countries, like moving gear and filming in really remote locations is so much easier, which is why we've never properly explored the US, because we can't afford to have 10 porters carrying, 40 kgs or 40 pounds each in the backpack, and go hiking for 10 days, across Utah or something like that. It's just never been in the cards.
And it would take longer. I know that they do have people that ride donkeys in, and they have donkeys bring this, luxurious camp set up where they have the cook with them, and they have all of that. So they do, and we actually hired a donkey to come in to drop off our supplies, and we met them at a certain area in the Sierras. I've done that, twice.
Okay, that's good. I might have to get that information once we're finished. Yeah, because
you're right. You still have to do the permits. I started taking my grandson camping 2 years ago, and I just bought him his first backpack. And so we're going to go backpacking this summer, and that'll be fun.
Sounds amazing. Yeah. I mean, can you imagine if after 1 or 2 trips in the United States, if he really likes it, and then you could take him to South America and you could see that it's a totally different style and also give him that kind of cultural experience as well.
Do that. He's the one that really does like it. I know he likes it. He never complains about going up a hill, doesn't ask, are we going to get there soon? Are we going to get there? That's
the key.
Yes, that is the key.
Yeah. Nothing worse than going on an epic trek or an epic adventure with someone who's just constantly saying, are we there yet?
How much longer? How much longer? Yeah. When are we going to get there?
Yeah, I'm tired.
Another good backpacking trip that I've done, I did 150 miles of it, was the Smoky Mountains of the Appalachia.
Oh, that's supposed to be incredible, because the Appalachian Trail is like world famous.
Oh, and the Smoky Mountains are just gorgeous.
And that's in North Carolina, right?
Yes. So we were on the very top of the ridge. So we walked across the top of the ridge. So if you stuck your left foot out, you were in Tennessee. If you stuck your right foot out, you'd be in North Carolina.
Yeah, the Smoky Mountains are world famous. They're supposed to be really beautiful.
Thing for you to kind of check out, where you don't have to travel that far. It's all in the United States.
I tell you, the United States is enough. Like especially for me, like I've traveled and filmed all around the world, but if you actually look at the United States, there's so much diversity and cultural diversity and physical landscape diversity and weather diversity. And if you include Hawaii and Alaska, I mean, you've got everything that's available anywhere else in the world here. So yeah, I can totally understand why people don't get passports or want to travel and see the rest of the world, because you can rock climb, you can hike, you can, do all your adventure activities in the continental U.S. I mean, it'd be a little boring maybe, but
I still want to go out of the United States.
That's just me, from coming here and kind of exploring it a little bit more.
I've been to Canada once. I actually did the Ironman Canada.
Oh, wow. Where was that?
It was back then. It was in Penticton. Actually, it's back in Penticton now as well.
Well, as a Canadian, I'm incredibly embarrassed, but where is Penticton?
It's in, I don't know exactly where it is. I'm really bad. I had to drive about 3 hours to get to Stanley Park from there. So once I left.
Oh, so it's near Vancouver.
I guess.
Vancouver is where Stanley Park is, in British Columbia? Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I didn't even know where that little town was.
It's a very little town.
You know what, though? A couple of years ago, I had a dream job. I was doing this thing for Tourism Canada, and I got to ride a motorcycle all the way across Canada. We did 24,000 kilometers, which is probably like 16,000 miles, and we did it in 74 days. And we went up into the Arctic, and we went from East Coast all the way to West Coast. So I feel like I should know more little towns in Canada, but I'm still at a loss sometimes. So back to you a little bit.
Okay.
So you, I mean, what kind of drove you into wanting to have a career in therapy? I mean, was it because it sounds like maybe you didn't unpack some of your childhood trauma before you made that decision.
No, I did.
Yeah.
None of it.
None of it.
No.
So you went in as kind of...
Well, I went in because I wanted to help, and that's what, and I'm trying to find this common thread. I just started writing another book, and like, how is it that we have this determination to finish something, this drive? It's more of a drive, right? So what is driving me to all of this? Well, I wanted to help people. I saw the families that were suffering, and I just felt like I wanted to do something about that. And I forgot what your question.
No, just, I mean...
Oh, that's right. So then I was working for somebody, making a name for myself. This company that I worked for, providing behavioral services in Ventura County, he was never there, the owner of the company, and kind of just let us do our own thing. And so I was making a name for myself in the community.
And you were already like a licensed therapist at that stage?
Just had a job. So then I thought to myself, hey, I'm not that crazy about my boss. I just want to go off on my own. How do I do that? Oh, okay, well, I'll just go back to school. Again, the ADHD,
Yeah.
I'll just sign up for school again. Okay, it's 2 years full time. Then it takes 3 years to get your intern hours, and then another year to study for the 2 state board exams. But I did it. And that's how I was able to go on my own and learn more about the therapeutic process. But I still knew I wanted to practice behavioral therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy. And I'll tell you why right now. There's I don't know, you've probably heard of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. Everybody...
No, you're going to have to unpack that for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So cognitive behavioral therapy is one of the scientific therapies that are used. And it is, how do you change your negative thought process? Because it's our thoughts that create emotions, and those emotions can be happy, sad, anxious, whatever they are. It's a thought that you're thinking that's creating those emotions. And then those emotions are exhibited through our behavior. But when we're exhibiting a maladaptive behavior, for example, I'm not going to use my swimming in the ocean, let's use something more, because I did stay away and I used avoidance, right? Because every time I would think about it, and I did try to do 2 triathlons after that, and I would get panic attacks in the water. But let's say it's more. Let's say, and I use this kind of analogy in my book, let's say you're walking from your apartment to go get your favorite cup of coffee down the street, and a car almost goes up onto the sidewalk, and you think, oh my gosh, I almost got hit by a car. That's awful. You know what? I think I'm going to go to a different coffee shop on the other, make a right out of my house instead of a left, because what if it happens, right? So now every morning you make a right, you're going down the street to get a coffee, but now you think, well, there's still cars on the street. They could still hit me. Best not to even go out and get a cup of coffee. I will just drive my car. And then you think, well, this could happen in my car. So everything just snowballs, and then you become secluded. You don't leave because you have this panic, this fear, and you stay home all the time. It affects your job. You lose your job. It affects your relationship. Everything happens. So cognitive behavioral therapy is, how do I get you to help you understand that you actually have control of your thoughts and that you can get in control of this behavior?
Yeah, so I have heard of that, and it was basically this guy, his name's Christian. He works with athletes, and he helps athletes come to the conclusion that they are not their thoughts. So it's a way of breaking behavior and performance from thinking, and he tries to kind of sever that tie, so that even if you are having negative thoughts, you're not bringing them into your life or making them real by communicating them. And he kind of works with them in a way of not really listening to his thoughts or ignoring or processing them, but not putting them out into the real world, in which case then they're real.
Right.
And so that it won't affect their, athletic performance and things like that.
Or giving it too much attention.
Yeah.
So that part, so how do we change your negative thoughts? The behavioral aspect of it, behavioral therapy, is how much of your environment is contributing to your behavior. So if we use your athletes, for example, what if they are getting ready for the game and their partner says, okay, you're going to be fine today, just don't even think about that. Well, now you've already had him think about it.
No, I'm thinking about it, yeah.
Or if he says, I'm having these thoughts, oh, what are you thinking? Tell me what you're thinking. So how much of your environment or partners are contributing to the behavior? So when you come into my office, I get an idea of when the behavior started. When did you start isolating yourself from everybody around you? Well, it happened about, let's say, the pandemic.
March 2020?
March 13th,
Yeah.
2020, the day of the lockdown, is when it started. Okay, well, I want you to take data, and you would take it's called ABC data. So A would be the antecedent, what happened just before the behavior occurred. B would be, what does the behavior look like? And C, what were the consequences? So if you were to put the behavior was, my heart started to pound fast. I started to sweat. I got these negative thoughts. And what happened just before that? Well, I was going to go outside to get a cup of coffee. I was dressed, I was ready to go. And then what was the consequence of your behavior? I didn't go. I decided best to stay home. And then my wife went out and got the coffee for us.
Yeah. I got a coffee at the end of the day, but I'm a little bit psychologically not where I want to be, I suppose.
We know how the people in your home or your environment are contributing to the behavior, right? And so if that's the case, then I would maybe next time call your partner in and have her fill out her own data sheet. And then what we do that's different also is we not only do we combine the two therapies together, but we also write you a specific treatment plan. So what that looks like is there's a motivational story. And in that story, I write a story based on the data that you've taken. And it's more like, my name is Ryan. I'm diagnosed with anxiety, but that does not define who I am. I've been successful for many years. I know that I can do this. I have a partner who's going to help me and support me. I'm going to stop, make a healthy choice, take a deep breath and go. So not only we have a motivational story, I give you visuals to put up. That's also part of the behavioral part, aspect of it, different posters or printouts that you're going to put up. And then also what I think is pretty cool is that you're going to be made accountable to practice. So you're going to be given a sheet and we're going to fill it out, like when you're going to practice, when you're going to do this, when you're going to do that, kind of like what you and I were talking about, the training. Because the way I look at it is, typically, you'll go into a therapist's office and they'll say, okay, let's do some deep breathing. Now, the next time you're anxious, let's do the deep breathing. Well, that's like saying, I'm going to sign up for a half marathon, but I'm not going to practice until the day of the marathon. I'm going to show up and I'm going to run that half marathon. You have to practice before the event. And it's just like preparing yourself for possibly getting a panic attack. Take some proactive approaches, practice your strategies and calming techniques before the event takes place.
That's wild.
So I kind of use a little bit of, everything.
How, because for someone like you who works with individual people and probably also families and working with people who have had trauma or physical disabilities and stuff like how important is it to have like the whole family involved in the therapeutic process? Because I feel like if you're Mike Johnson, living in North Carolina in the Smoky Mountains, and you have a wife and two kids, you're just Joe average, but you're suffering from major panic attacks or you're suffering from something like this, like it does become like an entire family healing process. Like you mentioned, the partner might have to come in and also help out. Like, I feel like that is so important. And a lot of people just don't have that support network around them either, which is incredibly dangerous.
It is dangerous. And I have to say that family members, when they come in, it can go one of two ways. One of the ways is that the family is so thankful because I give them their own, this is what you need to do now. When you notice, because they're taking different data on themselves. It's from their perspective. When they start to see, we'll just use you again, when they start to see Ryan pace back and forth, they know that he's starting to experience anxiety. So they're going to know how to use one of the strategies. One of the ones that I use that I made up while I was in the car, because when I was suffering my panic attacks, I couldn't drive, and driving was part of my job. So my therapist had said, you have to, think of something positive. Well, my hands are clutched to the wheel. My heart's coming through my chest. How can I stop myself? And I thought, I'm going to think of a signal. A signal has 3 colors, red, yellow, and green. And so I made a signal card. I kept it in my car. And when I would start to have those negative thoughts, okay, red, stop. I'm going to stop what I'm thinking. I'm going to think of something positive, whether I'm going to sing a song, whatever it is. And yellow means make a choice. Make a choice. Turn the radio on. Start to use a strategy. Green means go. Okay, go. Turn the radio on, start singing, get my mind off it, do the deep breathing. And that's still what I use today. I use the signal card. And so the the partner would say, Brian, red, stop. You need to stop whatever you're thinking or doing. Yellow, let's make a choice. Make a choice. We're going to think about something positive. Green, let's breathe and start breathing with the client. You know, your partner would breathe with you. So the family is like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Now we know what to do. We're not going to enable anymore. I'm not going out for the coffee.
Yeah, get your own damn coffee.
Get your own coffee. And then if you're a coffee drinker, you've got to have that coffee.
Yeah.
And then, or it can go the other way, where that person in the family they're the identified patient, so to speak. And let's say the couple's not getting along. And so their son or daughter is having behavioral concerns. Well, I can say, this is what I want you to do. This is the plan. But once things start to get better, they have to focus on their relationship. And a lot of times they don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So what do? You go back to what's natural and have the child continue to be the patient.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I grew up with divorced parents, but it happened at such a young age. Like I was about 8, I think. And I feel like I just sailed through that somehow. Or maybe I have trauma that I haven't really dealt with. But I'm curious, like for your experience growing up in a single family home at a time where it wasn't very popular. I mean, I feel like my generation, so I grew up in the 80s, right? Like I was born in 78. I grew up in the 80s, went to high school and stuff like that. And I feel like at some stage in the 80s, everyone just became like super selfish. And you just saw, like, I tell you, all of my friends in grade school, all their families ended up divorced. Like it was just like a wave that came through, like, the late 80s where people were
the thing to do.
Yeah, it was almost like a huge cultural shift. And I just feel like so many of my friends and families ended up getting divorced. And it was such a strange wave. And now, like, looking back on it, like 30 plus years ago, like, and thinking about it, I was like, wow, there really was like a huge wave that came through. But for you, I mean, you must be going through this at a stage where, everyone had, the 2-car garage, the 2 kids at home, and the white picket fence. I mean, that must have been a mind twist for you.
It was. And also because typically, and I would say the dad leaves, not the mom.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah.
So for the mom to just leave, I was actually relieved when she left because I didn't know what I was going to find when I would come home from school. Would it be my mom, sober, and which she probably really wasn't, but at least she wasn't, falling down drunk. Or would I find the mom who was screaming and yelling and running out to the street? So for me, it was a relief when she left. But at the same time, it was embarrassing.
Yeah.
So when I was growing up, at the people who were off my block, a lot of times I would just say that my mom died.
Because it was less of a story to have to tell.
Yeah.
Yeah. How crazy is that? That was part of your coping mechanism.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know. It's there's certain people can just survive through things like that. I really do believe it. There's something innate in us that we can survive where others aren't as lucky.
Yeah. And it seems like, in finding your husband, you built up your support network again from scratch, when you were 19 and you got married, and then you started your own family. That was part of you, like rebuilding or healing, the earlier trauma.
It definitely was. And his parents, his mom and I were so close. She was, I think, to her, I was a daughter she never had, and she was the mother I never had. So we were very, very close. I was very fortunate. They were a loving family, and it was great. Yeah, I got to start my own family at a young age, but it all worked out. So
that's good. I haven't done a lot of therapy. Disclaimer: I haven't done a lot of therapy in my time, but I'm always curious. Like, as a therapist who helps other families, what's it like inside your family? Like, you've got kids, you've got a husband. Like, what are the things that you're doing on a daily basis in your family to keep everyone on track? Is it very different from what you have to tell your patients on a regular basis? Like, do you bring all these, tricks and ways of developing better habits? Do you also bring them into your own family?
Well, my older daughter, she's been working for me for like 14 years.
Also as a therapist?
Yes, she's a licensed marriage family therapist, and she just finished her certification in applied behavioral analysis, and she signed up to take her test so she can, like me, she'll be national board certification in applied behavioral analysis. So she has all the tools. I don't have to. The younger one, she she's doing fine. She graduated college. She wanted to go into the entertainment industry more as a comedian,
That's a tough road, but it's exciting.
And COVID.
Yeah.
So everything bottomed out for her. But she's applying herself, and she's still wants to go down that path, and she's supporting herself, and she's really never asked us for anything. So she's doing okay. It's just, I feel for anybody in that industry because I know how difficult it is.
Yeah. I mean, even without COVID, getting through in that profession is incredibly challenging, as it was for me. Like, my journey through the television world has been painful and difficult, and then COVID just wiped everything out, right? And then now it's trying to come back into that space is very difficult because so many things have changed. Like the risk profile of the way people sign off on projects now is completely different than the way it was in 2019.
So how is it different?
Well, so the way I like to describe it is like in 2016, 17, 18, 19, a producer, a senior producer, for example, for Discovery Channel or BBC or something like that, they would often get like a budget for the year.
Okay.
So let's say, just because it's easy and it's a divisible number, we'll say it's $10 million. Okay. So it's like, okay, we have $10 million to make shows this year. What are we going to do? So, back in the day, they would give maybe $1 million to 10 different junior producers or directors and say, okay, these are the shows we're making, these 10 projects. Go make them, and we'll get them back, and we'll broadcast them next year. Maybe 1 or 2 will be award contenders. Maybe a couple will break through, a couple maybe not so much. But, you're getting variety, right? But now it's totally different. And what people are doing now is they're taking that entire $10 million budget, and they're putting $9 million into a one series with an A-list actor.
Oh.
And then they're taking $1 million and putting it into, acquired content that they can pull off of other, platforms or who are made by other producers, finished work that's available, right? So instead of them, relying on those 10 different voices or those 10 different stories, now they're just putting more budget into one massive project because that'll break through and get the media attention that their channel needs. And we're at a stage now where, they're doing that and they're still not making more money than they were before. So it's, it's just a cycle of when it's going to...
The pendulum will swing back to the...
It always does.
Yeah.
It always does. Like, we're always in this pendulum swing of variety versus celebrity. And we're always in this pendulum of, scripted versus reality. So it's just a constant wheel. And I came through this phase of everyone wanted unscripted content, which is what I do, documentary kind of style stuff. And everyone wanted a lot of different voices. So raising money to do crazy stuff like walking across deserts in China was really easy. I mean,
right.
Once I had built a name for myself, it was easy to have those conversations. And now, post-COVID, it's been much more challenging because the risk profile of what people want and what they're willing to pay for has completely changed.
Which is interesting because I love to watch documentaries. I mean, that's like my favorite thing to do. It's like, oh, let's watch this one, and I'll start watching. Like if it's something on Everest, I'll watch everything that was done on Everest. Or I pick something that I watch everything. Now I just watched Martin Sheen. He did it in it was probably 10 years ago. The Way. I don't know if you've seen that.
Well, that's the trek you're going to do in Spain on your.
Yeah, it's the exact same route.
Yeah, I watched that. It was a beautiful movie.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
I thought it was really done well.
Yeah, I love it when big A-list actors take a risk and do a little small like production. Small budget movie, and it was so beautiful. His journey,
and I think for him it was life-changing as well because he got to walk it. Yeah. So that was pretty cool. And
you're going to follow in his footsteps soon.
I'm going to follow in his footsteps. That's right.
I mean, I wanted to actually talk more about that trip, but we can get back a little bit to So my world has really changed quite a bit. So it's been strange actually because before. Actually, the first few months of COVID were the most crazy because you have to imagine I was making adventure television content all around the world, so I couldn't get on a plane. Oh. And then I was doing speaking events, and I couldn't get on a plane or stand in a room with anyone.
No, nobody would go.
Yeah. So I literally did nothing for like 4 months.
Oh, that must have been awful.
Yeah, because there was no one to really chat with. There was no one to collaborate with. There was no one to film with. There was no stories to tell. It was just sitting waiting. And that was devastating. And then we did get out in 2020 in the summer and filmed in Europe because we were like, okay, if I can get into Europe, we can drive around. We don't have to fly. We don't have to cross borders. Europe was kind of its own little bubble. And that was a kind of like my big, we're going to get back to work. And then we did that, and we filmed from August all the way to November in 2020. But then the second lockdown came, and that just crushed us. Like in November 2020, Europe really closed, and Asia closed, but the US pretty much didn't lock down again. So it was better here, but I was obviously in Europe trying to make stuff, and it was pretty rough.
And then I think we started to travel again. Was it 2022 or 2021? I think it was 2021 is when, because that's when I did the Appalachia, I remember. So we were able to fly.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2022 is when I went to Chile, and that was Chile and Argentina, and that was a pain. As you know, like you had to get your COVID shot at a certain time. They had to, I mean, you had to check all these different things to make sure that you could come in or go on the plane or wherever it is you were going. It was awful.
It was. I remember being in Zurich, and I had to get a COVID test before I was going to fly back to Dubai. And I tested positive, and I felt fine. And then they're like, "Sir, just go home, come back in a couple of days. We'll see if you're negative. I can't let you on the plane." So I had to like rebook my ticket, and I just sat in this apartment and just, without any real symptoms, or I was fine and didn't have any difficulties. And then I went back a couple of days later, tested negative, and then I could go. But it's like, can you imagine like in 2019, coming out of Mongolia, 2 weeks in filming, and then having to rest for a couple of days, and then flying to Taiwan to do a speaking event, and then going back to Dubai, and then going to Kenya to film something else. Like planning anything was completely up on its head, unless you can travel around on a private jet, which is what the rich of the rich did. But the rest of us were all just...
It didn't affect them.
No. The rest of us were all just struggling with rules and regulations and red tape.
And they didn't have to wear a mask on the plane, I'm sure.
Of course not, yeah.
And that's a whole nother thing.
It is indeed. It is. So what made you want to do this pilgrimage from France to Spain? It's all the way to Portugal, isn't it?
We're stopping at the big cathedral in Spain. You could go a little bit farther, not much, to Portugal, but we're going to spend time in Madrid. So it's just under 500 miles. It's like 490 miles. So I'm like, can I just say 500? It's just...
Yeah, absolutely.
So there are different pilgrimages to do. This is the most popular one. I honestly think that when I did the bike ride across the United States, and I was able to go way that long. And like I said, everything was the same. So I wanted to start doing different things and looking and doing research into this. I guess it is a pilgrimage,
What's the name of it again?
It's Camino Santiago.
Yeah. 500 miles.
Yeah. And, I think I'm not a very super religious person. I'm Jewish. This is a lot of Catholics there. I mean, a lot of the Jews were killed in Spain during the Spanish Inquisition. So it's, so that will have meaning for me. But the journey itself, I think, is going, these long distances that you do, anything that you do, whether it's hiking to the summit of a mountain or going across the desert, it gives you time to think about your life and just where you're at. And I don't know, I just love it.
I think there's a real spirituality that can be found in doing some adventures and being outdoors and going through, like, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone in nature in general, I feel is a spiritual event. And I also think, doing some of these religious pilgrimages and not being religious, but just kind of going to be outside and to kind of do the trip and, pay your respects along the way, even though it doesn't really mean as much to you as it would to someone who's, deeply religious. But I think this kind of stuff is wonderful, and more people need to do it, because it pulls people out of their life. It gets them off the treadmill.
Yes.
And allows people to, like, stick their head up through the clouds and be like, oh, what's really going on around here? And, like, am I happy? And, like, what should I change when I go back? Because you don't go back the same person.
No.
And I love the way these trips really do transform you.
And I think that's what happened to me going across the United States, is that it transformed me that way. Just to, like you said, be out of your comfort zone, experience something new. You have to rely on yourself. Even though there was the women's tour that was along, something traumatic happened to me. There was just 3 days left in the ride. We were already in Florida, and I had just left Tallahassee. Normally I rode by myself a lot of the time, and surprise, I had one gal that would ride with me once in a while, but mainly I was by myself. And then out of nowhere, there was 4 dogs that were lying in wait, and they attacked me while I was on my bike.
Jesus, no one talks about that enough,
was
but the dogs can be terrible.
It was awful. And I had dogs chase me along the way. I had a whistle, you had this horn, you yell at them, they go away. These dogs were on a mission, and they herded me off the road. So it's a very desolate road, and they herded me off the road to the left, and I was screaming because I knew that they were not going to stop. And then I felt the first bite in my right calf.
Oh my God.
Then I looked down, and I was just screaming for my life, and I thought, nobody hears me, but I have to keep screaming. And I kept getting farther into the wooded area, and they bit me. The same dog bit me again in the right calf, and I thought, I've got to get back onto the road because I'm going to fall off my bike. I don't know how I stayed on it. So I veered off to the left, and as I did that, the one dog came around and bit me twice in my left calf. So now I felt like with the second bite that he was trying to pull me off my bike in a way, so they could maul me to death.
Sure.
So I got back on the road, and there happened to be 2 cars coming the opposite direction, and I almost ran into the car just screaming for help. And he got out of his car. I got off my bike, fell to the ground, started to crawl in between the 2 cars because his sister-in-law was behind him. They were on their way to church. They saved my life. I ended up they took me up the road in the car with my bike. They said, let us take you to the hospital because my legs were just dripping blood. And I said, no, I want to finish the ride. Well, that's who we are, right? I know. I just put a Band-Aid. What is it? That's like Monty Python.
Yeah.
So,
where the knight gets dismembered, it's like nothing but a flesh wound.
It's a flesh wound. Yeah. So I go up the road, and they said, stay here. One of the other bikers, we're going to take them to meet you. And then I rode to the hospital and, had the tetanus shot, and they couldn't stitch up my legs because it's an animal wound and they didn't want it to get infected. Interestingly enough, I've been contacting animal control, the sheriff's department, the commissioner's office. Nobody wants to do anything with these dogs. I got information that these dogs have already bitten 3 other people before me within 4-month period.
That's incredible.
Yes. It's very sad, and they don't want to do anything. So I'm pulling all this information together, and I'm actually going to join their town meeting towards the end of April and beg them to do something with the dogs to keep other people safe and show them all my documentation that I have. And if they don't do anything, then I'm really going public.
I think it's strange. The United States has such a actually the Western world has such a strange relationship with animals. Like, you hear Sarah McLachlan singing her beautiful songs for the animal welfare, society or the Humane Society, adopt a dog or take care of pets and things like that. But then, like, you go to India, Pakistan, China, and animals are treated completely differently. Like, so we went through, my brother and I, we rode motorcycles all around China. It was one of the first TV shows I made, and we had a huge section where we went through Tibet. And in Tibet, the dogs are like wolves. Like,
really?
They're huge. Yeah. I would say semi-wild, but they've definitely been breeding with wolves. And people in Tibet, they don't keep the pets around. They don't keep their dog wolves around to play with at night and to snuggle next to the fireplace. They keep them on a chain link outside to keep people away. So they use it as security.
Right.
So they're not like cuddly pets like the way we treat our pets here. So and then some of them get off their leashes and then become like fully wild and fully insane. And we were riding motorcycles through all these villages, and we would see these dogs sleeping by the side of the road, waiting to attack anything that came by. We saw these dogs attack Jeeps and cars.
Yes.
Some of them would run head first and try to bite through the door and then bounce off the car as it went through at like 50 miles an hour. Like, these dogs were attacking cars that were speeding through these villages. And then my brother and I were on motorcycles, so we're totally, we had leg padding, which would have been more than what you had. We had like pants, motorcycle pants with padding in different places. But again, these they would try to knock you off the bike. And every time we went through a village, my brother and I, we had to come up with like some kind of strategy to avoid the dogs.
Right.
And on a motorcycle, what we did is we would come through the village super, super slow. And we would wait for them to wake up and wait for them to wake up. And the slower we went, the slower they went.
Oh.
Like, if we came through fast, they would get up and chase us. But if we came in super slow, we would kind of lull them into this like, oh, what are these guys doing? And then they would start coming towards us. And then as enough came towards us, we would gun it. and shoot right through them, and you had to time it perfectly. But we were doing this like 8 or 10 times a day.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, those dogs did chase the car that I was in.
Yeah.
They put up the back. My bike was in there, and they started coming after the car. And the woman driving the car, because the man stayed back with the sister-in-law to stop any other bikers. I was so afraid because 20 other women are going to be coming up the road.
Mm-hmm.
So these dogs were chasing and growling, like you said, running after the car.
Yeah.
And the woman says, I drive my kids to school every day, and these dogs are chasing cars all the time. And she says one of them's going to run off the road, run somebody off the road. I said to her, I want to thank you so much for picking me up. If it hadn't been for you, I probably would have been mauled to death out there. And she said, well, we were on our way to church, and if we didn't stop to help you, we have no business going to church.
Well, there you go.
I thought, well, that's profound. I'll never, ever forget that.
Yeah.
That was really profound.
It is a nice way to think about it. I think once you take love and compassion and food away from any animal, they become a totally wild beast. And that is no longer the soft, cuddly cat or dog that you grew up with or you have envisioned. They become something that has to hunt for food, and they will absolutely kill you if need be.
So when you were in South America, the dogs were roaming the streets, but they were all very friendly and they were well fed.
Yeah. So you do visit countries where people feed the stray dogs and stuff like that. And that definitely takes the edge off of the dogs, right? Because they're not trying to gnaw your calf muscles for food, which is great. When I was in South America, I was in Peru, I was in Cusco, I was in Machu Picchu. I didn't see a lot of dogs there. But
I didn't see a lot of dogs. They might eat you.
But what I did realize is while we were in Peru, well, actually, I just remembered this. You just triggered this memory. While we were in Cusco, I remember they have a National Animal Collecting Day.
Oh.
Yeah. So every year in Peru, at least this was the case in 2016 or 17, whenever we filmed there, they have one day in Peru every year where if you own an animal, it has to be in your home. And they go all around the country picking up strays, and then they slaughter them.
Oh my God.
Yeah, which is a sad thing to say, but if you think about all of those strays, attacking people for food, it creates a terrible situation, right? So, but they had one. It was like a calling day where it's like, okay, if you own an animal that you care about, keep it indoors, and then if not, we're collecting every animal on the streets and we're going to dispose of them, and that was what they had to do just to keep the baseline of where they were.
You rode your motorcycle that day.
Well, in Peru we were climbing and trekking. The motorcycles were in China and India, and
that would be the day to ride.
Yeah, that would be the one day.
The next day.
The next day was very quiet on the streets, but it's funny. It's funny how different people in different parts of the world see animals very differently, and how they treat them differently, and how they respond.
It's not even. Where the incident happened to me, it's an extremely small town. I mean, really small. And the people that own the dogs live in a trailer a half a mile up the road.
So they were owned.
Oh, yeah. They have multiple family members living in one trailer. So when I first got back, I contacted the sheriff and said, hey, I want something done with these dogs. The more I think about it, it was the next day. The more I think about it, I'm concerned about somebody else coming down the street. Well, you have to have animal control to take care of that. So I called animal control, and he's like, well, the family has no money. And I said, well, I don't want money. I just think something should be done with these dogs, fenced in or euthanized. Something needs to be done. And he said, well, I went to high school with the guy, and
that's not relevant at all.
I said, yes. And, but so it's the good old buddy system that nobody wants to do anything. And I don't know, Ryan. Yeah. It's just so bizarre to me. He said, well, I met the dogs and they seem nice. I said, well, maybe his name was Mr. Slack, by the way.
Oh, nice one.
Leave that, yes. So I said, well, maybe Mr. Slack, you should take your bike and ride up the road and see how nice the dogs are.
Yeah, especially if they haven't been fed for the day yet.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe they haven't been fed. That's really not a concern of mine. My concern is there was 4 other bites within 4-month period, and the person who got bit before me was only 17 days. It happened 17 days before my bite.
Mm-hmm. And that's crazy that they know that that's happening and they still let it happen.
I know, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, everyone wants to treat pets like people. And I think again, if you give the pets love and compassion and food, they are like little people. Like you can literally take care of them. You can see their personalities grow, and you can care for them, and they'll recognize you. And it's a beautiful, beautiful relationship with a pet, right?
Yeah.
But not all pets are created equally, and not all pets are treated equally. And once an animal kind of goes feral or semi-feral like that, it's dangerous.
It is. And I think it's something in their brain. We have people with mental health issues. I'm sure there's dogs with mental health issues.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, for sure. No, that's terrifying. How did you even, so that was like 3 days left in your trip. How did you even finish?
I did. I just made myself finish. The next day I asked this one gal, Laurie, who rode with me to the hospital and helped me get the prescription and all that. I asked if she would ride with me because I was afraid to ride by myself.
How did you not get panic attacks getting back on the bike and looking around you 360 degrees for the next 3 days, just waiting to see something run up out of the grass and try to grab you?
Well, I just think I was so focused on finishing the ride. I only had after that day, I think there was only 2 days left. And the last day we all stayed together. We got a police escort into St. Augustine, which was really cool. So it wasn't, I don't know. Honestly, I have no idea. But that's the way that I do things. I just keep going.
That's the only way to do anything. Yeah.
It's the Monty Python, I swear. It's like, oh, that's happened? Oh, well, just keep going.
Nothing but a flesh wound. That was great. So, where do you, it's funny, you've kind of had a whole career of helping other people. And now I feel like now you're kind of taking time to do all these great adventures and kind of help. Not that you need help, but kind of do some things for yourself. What is that transition like? Because it feels like in the early part of your career, you worked hard to build your own company and build a name for yourself and obviously help all the amazing people that you've worked with. But now it feels like you're at a stage where you're taking more time for yourself. What's that transition like?
I'm going to find out on this journey because I know that this is going to be a time for a lot of self-reflecting just because of the age that I am now as well. And what have I done with my life? What do I want to do with my life?
Those are scary questions to ask.
I know. But I think I'm fortunate in the fact that I know that the company is still going to continue helping people through my daughter. Mm-hmm. I feel bad now because people who want to, have sessions with me or new clients coming in, I'm taking more time for myself. So I'm really not able to do that. But I do have other therapists that can, it's hard to say no to people when they're in crisis. It's just so hard.
I can imagine, yeah. But at the same time, you have to take time away to do things for your own personal growth and development so that when you do come back, you're a better version of yourself. I feel like that is absolutely true.
And I'm going to use that.
It wasn't me. No, I think it's true. I think if you just work every day, you become useless to yourself and useless to the people around you. I really feel like you have to go out of your comfort zone, do things, push yourself in different ways so that when you come back, you're a better version of yourself to make it simple. I really do think people come back from those adventures and trips and things like that, really a better version. Then you can help more people.
I think you're right. And in the past, I've always taken time to do small things like, I'll travel here to do a 50-mile race, or I'll travel here to do a marathon, or I'll do a triathlon over somewhere else. So I was experiencing it, but it was just short.
Too short.
Too short. Now, when I went to Cuba this last time, I think I was gone for 15 or 16 days. And to me, it felt like, God, it feels like I just left. Now that I'm taking longer trips.
Yeah, well, this 6-week trip through Spain will be epic. I don't want to freak you out, but this will profoundly change you in some way, shape, or form. You can't spend 6 weeks walking every day with your own thoughts and your own visions and your own ideas, reflecting on your own life, planning for the future as well. That kind of meditative experience is going to be transformational.
I think so. I hope so. I really do. I hope it will. I used to listen to music years ago, probably 10 years ago. I don't listen to an iPod anymore. And some people will say to me, how can you ride by yourself? And how can you ride without an iPod? And I said, I have so many thoughts that are constantly going on in my head. I can entertain myself for hours.
Yeah. No, it's true. It does become really meditative. I had this experience a couple of years ago where I was walking across a desert. So we did 100 miles in 10 or 12 days through this desert in China. And there was nothing, no villages, no mobile phone access, no water, no anything. So we had a 16 camel caravan. We had a guide, we had someone to help us cook and stuff like that, and to deal with all the camels and the gear. And we filmed a beautiful episode of TV. But it was funny. Like, it was myself and my cameraman, and we would walk for 8 or 10 hours a day. We would stop and do some filming here and there. A lot of the filming was very instinctual, so I didn't have to say, oh, guys, go over there, go over there. Like, they're always thinking about where to be and what to do. And one day we just didn't talk to each other for like 6 hours, and it felt fine. Like, we were just all in our own heads, and, you know, and all doing our own thing. And it was like like we were all just in our own self-meditative space, and just to have that time to think and to have that time to reflect without being bombarded by distraction is so important. Like, that's why I love doing this. Like, I do this for 2 hours a day or every other day or whenever my amazing guests can find time to come see me. And I love it because it's an hour and a half or two of chatting with someone with no phone.
Right. Where you don't have to look up. And that's why I don't even wear an iPhone watch. I tried it for like maybe a year. And I thought, I kept looking at it, and I would get messages, or I would do a run that I thought was 5 miles, but I was 100 yards short. So I'd have to run another 100 yards. Well, who the heck cares?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, really, what difference does it make?
Yeah.
So I don't want to be as connected.
Yeah, it's nice, right?
Yes.
You know what, though? I'll tell you this. I got my mom an Apple Watch, and this is not to sponsor her in any way, shape, or form, but she uses it all the time because she loves to count her steps. And yeah, and it's great because she loves to do puzzles in the evening and watch Netflix and things like that. So the watch like tells her to get up and move around every like 45 minutes or something like that. But she loves counting her steps like every day. She goes out for these walks, and that's how she you know, keeps herself moving and active and things like that. And she loves just counting the steps every day. And, you know, how many miles, and she's always sending me screenshots of her watch face. Like, I did 10,000 steps a day. And I've totally gamified exercise for like my 74-year-old mother now.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
That's one thing I think is really helpful because, you know, she doesn't get all the notifications. She doesn't have all the apps and things
right.
like that.
It's different when you have a company or a boss that's always calling you, whatever the case may be, and you're getting emails all the time or text messages from clients. And so you can't, I tell my clients, I'm only going to call you between these hours. I'm not going to talk to you anymore. If you have a crisis, you need to call 911 because.
Yeah. You can't be on call all the time for everyone.
Fair.
Yeah.
It's not fair.
Yeah. It's so hard, isn't it?
It's very hard. Yeah. And the type of job that I have and that my daughter has and everybody that works for our company, it's always a crisis. That's why they're seeing you, because they're going to lose their job, or they're going to get kicked out of their day program, or they're going to have to leave their house and go to a group home. That's not always a bad idea. It's 9 times out of 10, it's better.
How do you, I mean, this is kind of totally off topic, and I'm throwing this at you totally out of the blue. Like, where do you think, like, LA is, for example, now, you know, with its mental health crisis and its homeless people? Because I feel like I grew up in Toronto for years, and we had a pretty significant homeless population. And, you know, you would read these really in-depth reports about how state funding was moving away from, you know, mental health hospitals and just leaving people to fend for themselves. And I feel like all these people have now fallen through the cracks, and no one's getting the care they need, and like everyone's just ending up on the streets. And the majority of the people on the streets are not mentally fit.
No.
You know, to you know, have a job or to carry on with normal relationships and things like this. I find this really, really disturbing because I've lived abroad now for like 20 plus years, and now coming back and seeing, you know, how this funding has been reallocated. And now to see, I was up in San Francisco in the summer, last summer, I was up in Seattle.
How was it? Because I don't think I'd go back to those areas, which is kind of sad.
It's terrifying. Like downtown San Francisco is overrun. Seattle was even worse, actually, and not enough people are talking. But downtown Seattle is a dead zone. Like it feels like you're in a zombie apocalypse.
It's sad.
Yeah.
It's just so sad. Well, my thinking is on that was that we should never have gotten rid of the state hospitals. I think that. They got rid of the state. There's a big hospital in our area called Camarillo State Hospital that housed the mentally people who had mental health issues. And when that closed down, what happened was that all these homes in suburban areas were opening up as homes to house people with mental health issues. The problem with that is there's a couple of problems. One is that it's not a locked facility. They don't have to stay there.
Mm-hmm.
So they can go on the street. And then they can collect their check every month, and they can get their EBT card to get food, and they can spend it however they want. You know, not the EBT, but now you can even use that for fast food.
What's an EBT?
It's it is the equivalent to food stamps.
Okay.
So people used to use food stamps, but then I guess it was a stigma. I don't know, but people could see in line that they had food stamps. So now they went to a card. Not that people can't see that's an EBT card, but it's okay. Whatever works.
So it's a food-based kind of charity.
Yeah, so people can order and get food. People can get food from the grocery store. They can go to fast food now. But they're not getting the care that they need either, because they're choosing not to stay in these homes that are, like I said, it could be 2 blocks from you or down the street from you. And also, everything is outside. So if you have to see a doctor, if you have to go to a psychiatrist, if you need to get services for something, everything is outside that home, where before it was all housed in the state hospital. Remember we were talking about the pendulum for your...
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing with this. And what's happening is that society felt bad for individuals that they were locked up, and nobody likes to see that. Everybody wants to see somebody healthy and happy. But some of these people can't be in the community, and some of them don't even want to be in the community. So forcing that on somebody who's unstable and not taking their medication is a recipe for disaster all the way around.
Yeah.
So
I feel
hopefully the pendulum will start to go back at least to the middle. There has to be a middle.
Yeah, I feel like we're way off the deep end.
Way, way off the deep end.
I wonder who benefits from all that.
We can only guess.
We can only speculate, but it's
Can't
definitely...
talk about that on the show.
Yeah, but it is a wild one, just seeing.
And there's a sense of entitlement, and I can say this because my sister was homeless for quite a while, and she has a drug addiction problem. So you can see how our upbringing affected her. She can't get past.
Oh wow!
What happened when my mom left? She's still living in the past.
She's younger than you?
She's 3 years younger than me, and she's addicted to drugs, and she's thank goodness, well, she stayed out of my brother and I. She didn't contact us for many, many years. She came back into our lives, and my brother and I paid for her to go to therapy. I always said, if you want to go back to school, I will pay for you to go to school, but I am not sending you a check every month.
Yeah, go back into some structure.
Yeah, I'll pay for you to go to nursing school. I'll pay for you to go to school. I'll pay for you to go to therapy, but I cannot send you a check every month. And so she finally got housing in the valley somewhere. And during our last conversation, she said, yeah, I said, how's your house? She says, oh, it's good, the apartment complex. She said, but can you believe that because her and her partner wanted a king-size bed so that they could fit in it with their dogs, that they're not going to buy us chairs for our kitchen table?
That seems like a crazy... That's not even related.
No, but it's the sense of entitlement.
Yeah. And
I said, well, I'm paying for all that through my tax money, but why should I have to pay for you now to get chairs? But it's that sense of entitlement where she's come accustomed to, okay, we're paying for her place to live. I'm glad she has a roof over her head. I'm really happy she's not in a Howard Johnson hotel with drug addicts anymore, right? That she found a spot. But there's that, I should have this and I should have that. No, that's not the way it works.
Yeah. It's tough. It's tough, dealing with that entitlement and having people not kind of have the capabilities or the desire to fend for themselves or to build something for themselves.
Because they become reliant on it.
Yeah.
And they've just become...
Maybe that was the reason why they got rid of all the mental health hospitals, is to put the burden back on the families,
Maybe that's a possibility. I never looked at it that way.
Well, I mean, yeah, because anything the government doesn't pay for, someone else has to pay for, right? So if it's your sister, then the government doesn't have to pay for it. You have to pay for it, but your taxes don't change. Just cutting expenses, right? That's the world we live in.
So we'll see what happens with it. We'll see what happens. I hope that there's a cleanup, because I think it's unsafe for the kids and for people walking around the streets. That's my concern, that there's a lot of unstable people that aren't going to get the help that they need. Yeah,
and it's made urban living in a lot of cities undesirable, which is sad, because like you, I mean, like when you grew up with your brother and you guys were just going out, and it's like, okay, be back when the sun comes down. And now it's like people don't want to let their kids go outside anywhere in an urban center because there's so many homeless people around.
No, now it's like, let's have a play date. Mm-hmm. Nobody had a play date back then.
Yeah.
What's a play date?
Where the parents come and everyone's around, and this is totally boring. Another question for you. So you've been helping people your whole career, working as a therapist, dealing with mental health and behavioral issues. how have your adventures over the last few years changed your perspective on mental health? Like, how has your cycling across the United States, or your trip to Cuba, or this upcoming 500-mile hike that you're about to do in France and Spain, like, how do you see these trips as just benefiting you, or do you see them benefiting the advice you can give to some of your patients? Because I'm a huge mental health advocate for people who want to get outside and sweat and like go for long walks, because there's nothing better on this planet than going for a long, sweaty walk by yourself when you feel like shit.
I agree.
Yeah.
And actually, from day one, I always, remember I had said that we write a scheduled plan, like you're going to practice your strategies here. I always put in, okay, how many days a week can you go for a walk?
Mm-hmm.
Or can you swim? Or can you hike? Because we're going to put these in here. Well, I don't know if I have time. Well, let's look at your schedule. Let's write out your entire schedule, because you are going to be exercising. We just need to figure out when it is.
Yeah, we are going to be exercising. Figure it out.
And then sometimes, like, even when my staff, or I might have a session when a client comes in, a client came in yesterday and he looked like he really needed to go for a walk. He was very anxious. So I said, let's go for a walk. We can have our session while we're walking. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how did he or she respond to that?
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, I mean, imagine how many people who are feeling anxious or depressed, or living in a living situation which is hurting them in some way, shape, or form. If you could transplant those people to France or Spain to do a 500-mile walk in 6 weeks, what would they be like at the end of that? Do you think, in your professional opinion, do you think they would be empowered by starting a journey and completing something that difficult, or do you think it would destroy them?
I think that a lot of people don't believe that they have the mental toughness for it. Like, they say, well, I'm not physically capable. And I say, well, it's probably 70% mental.
I think 90.
I was going to say 90, but I thought, well, is it really 90? But you're right. So much of it is mental. You just have to keep going. Like when I got attacked by the dogs, I just kept going. They begged me to take me to the hospital. Nope, I'm riding to the hospital. I think it would do them good. I have a client who's almost 80 years old, and she came in for skin picking. She was recommended from her dermatologist. So skin picking is, it's an OCD behavior and obsessive compulsive disorder. And so she would pick her face and pick her arms. And I wrote into her treatment plan that even though she uses a walker, you've got to walk. Mm-hmm. You've got to walk. Who can walk with you? So we figured out who can walk with her. And I said, in your complex, don't they have a place that does chair exercises? They do. All those places have chair exercises or different water aerobics. So she kept making excuses, but now she's finally, after a few months, she was finally on track and doing the things, and she looks great. She's doing so much better.
Well, that's great. I mean, I think, again, a physical activity is so important, because I think we all have anxious, nervous energy inside of us. And if we're not finding a way to deal with it in a healthy way, through exercise or through some kind of physical activity where we can process all that excess energy, which is just making us crazy, then I think we're all just, waiting for our mental health to deteriorate.
And it's like you said before, it hits a reset button. Mm-hmm. You go out to get the fresh air, you come back, it's almost like a new day. Oh, yeah. Okay, now what do I do?
Yeah, it's interesting. So where are you at writing about some of these experiences you've had in your life?
So this is my new book now. I thought, I can't believe I'm going to do another. But the first book was, somebody would say, you're an author. I said, oh, I guess I am.
That's what happens when you write books, yeah?
And this book was very specific because for years I had physicians and psychologists who were recommending patients to us because they knew that our type of modality worked, right? Mm-hmm. And so they kept saying, well, maybe you should write a book, because that way people who can't make it to therapy, at least they could read your book. So finally, during the pandemic, I just happened to turn 60 that year, and I said, I am going to write a book. I always set goals for myself. And there was 6 case studies in there that are all very interesting. They were kind of the worst of different disorders. And in the very beginning, I talked about myself and my childhood, because I thought I want the reader to know I've experienced anxiety, have some connection with the reader. And so then I put the treatment plan in the back, what we talked about, mm-hmm. The ABC charts, the visuals, everything. That book was done. And I think, who knows? I think it's doing okay. I wrote it for myself. When you write a book, you don't expect to be famous from it.
Yeah.
You just do it to get it out there. And then I was thinking, I'm going to write a book about my near-death experiences. And how was it that I was able to get through it, or part of it? Because I've had so many.
Which is interesting, by the way. Like, I haven't met a lot of people who have almost been killed as many times as you have. Yeah.
It just comes along with being an ultra athlete, but
Also, yeah. Yeah, but you just happen to put yourself in a few difficult places.
So to me, how come these things always happen to you? And I said, I don't know. It's not like I have, a neon light saying, come and get me. But even when I was drowning in the ocean, and they brought me to the hospital, several of the doctors came by and they said, we want to know how you stayed afloat in the water with the amount of liquid you had in your lungs. And I said, well, actually I was very calm because of the lack of oxygen to my brain. Mm-hmm. So I was using self-talk, and I thought, well, if I die, my kids are older, they're going to be okay, but I don't really want to die, so I'm going to just keep swimming as long as I can. Mm-hmm. And other incidences where I fractured my ankle during Western States 100-mile run, 12 miles into it.
Oh, that must have been terrible.
Gosh, it snapped one way and then snapped the other way. And so then I made it to the first aid station, and they said, you're not going to finish its release. And I just started falling because it was my son's birthday that day. He would have been, I don't know, whatever it was, 20 years old. And I brought flower petals with me, and I was going to put them along the course the whole way. And the one guy says, here's what we're going to do. I'm a soccer player. I'm going to wrap up your ankle, and you go as far as you want to go.
Oh, that's dangerous.
I went another 31 miles.
Oh my God. Are you serious?
Yes.
On a double broken ankle.
Well, it was fractured, but I guess, you can say it's, and again, who does that, really?
Yeah, because you can do more damage.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. But it meant so much to me. It was so hard to get into Western States. And then I trained so hard for it that I just had to go as long as I could go. And then it was over.
Well, that says something about your personality. I'm going to do 31 extra miles on a double fractured ankle.
So that's kind of, I thought I'll explain a little bit more about my childhood, my siblings, growing up and not being diagnosed with ADHD and always being sent to the principal's office, barely graduating high school. And then now to have a company and employ 25 employees. I won't go over 25 because of the California state law is too hard.
I'm not familiar with that, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. Anyway. So, how did I get that done?
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, we've been doing this. We've been chatting for a while. I still haven't figured it out. Like how you definitely righted the ship. I mean, it's impressive. To have ADHD, to suffer so much in school, and then to end up with what two master's degrees and a PhD.
No, not a PhD.
A licensed therapist.
Licensed therapist and board-certified in applied behavioral analysis.
Yeah.
But that's why I wanted to write the book, because I thought, well, this is really weird. Like, how do I keep coming through these? What is it that drives me to complete something or to see it through? And I'm hoping that this pilgrimage is going to help me do it. Maybe it won't. Maybe it will.
Oh, you're going to have so much alone time, like just in your own head. You're going to think up a whole nother book just while you're walking.
I was hoping to come to end with the book. I've written about, I have like 100 pages already, but after Kilimanjaro. Mm-hmm. But let's hope that nothing happens at Kilimanjaro.
So when is Kilimanjaro planned? Because I've done Kili. I love it.
It's going to be in August.
August next year.
No, this year.
Oh, this year.
I'm coming back, and I got my husband to go. And what happened was I said, why don't you come with me? We're going to spend like 5 days together. You can go on a safari for 5 days. I'll climb Kilimanjaro for 5 days, and then we'll meet back up again.
Okay, that sounds great. Now you're going to do the 5-day route.
Yes.
Okay.
Which I have no idea. I can't look at that right now because I have to take one. Did you do the 5-day route?
No. So we filmed an episode of TV when we were at Kilimanjaro. And I think we did the 8-day Lemosho route, which is the longest route. And we did that for 2 reasons. Number one, we wanted to spend more days on the mountain because we would get more footage. And we also interviewed some other trekkers and climbers and stuff like that, which was great. But also more time at altitude is safer, and it gives you less of a chance of getting altitude sickness or becoming ill. So if you have a chance between 5 days and 8 days, I would always choose 8 days because that extra time to acclimatize and to get yourself ready. Now, Kilimanjaro is a really good mountain to start with because it's on the equator. I don't know if you noticed that. So the weather is very temperate. And then also, too, it's only about 6,000 meters, which is what, like 19,000 feet?
Yes.
So it's pretty low. It's not too crazy, and you don't get the wild temperatures that you get in Aconcagua, which can be like -40, or Mount Elbrus in Russia, which can be again -40. So yeah. So Kili is great, and really, like, it's a very beautiful journey, and only really the last 2 days are really like pretty difficult, where you wake up with a headache, and then of course the summit day you have to get up at midnight and then go up through in the dark with the headlamp, and then get to the summit for sunrise, which is amazing. But Kili is absolutely gorgeous, because the thing that most people don't understand about Kilimanjaro is that it's a dormant volcano, and it is the tallest freestanding mountain in the world, which means there's no mountains around it. So like Mount Everest is the tallest mountain in the world, but you're surrounded by the Himalayas. There's mountains in every direction. You get to the top of Kili, nothing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the views must be incredible.
The view on a clear day, the views are spectacular. It's just like Serengeti, like grasslands in every direction, and it is spectacular.
See, I didn't know that.
No.
That's going to be really cool.
Yeah, it will be. It was great. I think it was our first or second episode of our second season, and we all really wanted to do it. And then when we finished that, we had so much confidence. Like, it wasn't so bad. Okay, we should try some other high mountains. And then we just started kind of continuing to do other kind of great adventures. And we did Mount Toubkal, which is in Morocco, which is great. If you like Kili, Toubkal is actually a smaller mountain, but it's a little bit more difficult. There's more ice to navigate, and it's further north in Africa. So it's the third highest mountain in the African continent, I believe. First is Kili. Second is Mount Kenya, which is smaller than Kili, but much more technical.
Okay.
I wouldn't try that unless you've done like proper rock climbing. But then Mount Toubkal in Morocco is a very beautiful journey.
Okay, I'll have to check into that.
If you're ever bored, which I don't think you are, but if you ever are like, I don't know what I'm going to do next year, let me know. I'll put together a list for you.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah. Well, I can look right at your website. I can see all the mountains you've climbed.
Yeah, we've been around. We've done some stuff for sure.
It's really cool.
I know. So, I mean, okay, so I was going to say, like, what do you have for the rest of 2024? I mean, you're going to Spain to do a 500-mile walk, and then you're climbing Kili. I mean, to do both of those in 1 year is fantastically ambitious. I mean, what is driving you really into this next phase of your adventuring and things like that? I mean, I know you want to be able to take more time away from your business, and you can, but I mean, what's driving you to spend it in this way?
I think also because I am obviously getting older, and I don't know how much longer can I do these endurance events. I don't know. This last summer, I did some very difficult century rides, and I look around and I'm like the oldest one out here on this bike. Why am I doing this? Now, I know I'm not the oldest one in a lot of, although maybe I am, but, when I hike Kilimanjaro, there'll be, I don't know, somebody. I think.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
But, it's time's running out. Mm-hmm. So I want to experience things that I couldn't before because I was so busy building my practice.
Mm-hmm. Building your safety net, your security, your, giving your daughter a job as well.
But mainly just helping people. I felt like there was something that I just had to keep giving back. But now I'm passing the torch to my daughter.
Do you feel selfish taking that time away? Because I don't.
No, anymore, I don't. I think I used to, but I don't anymore.
Yeah, I think that's a big switch.
That's something new, and I think that happened with the U.S. trip, riding the bike across the U.S. That changed my life. It really did, and it was that I can take these longer trips, and everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And like you said, I benefit from it and learn so much.
And then you can share that with your patients.
Yes.
Yeah. I think having that perspective and time away is just so valuable. Not enough people do it.
Well, I'm not going to stop until something happens, which God forbid, I hope it doesn't. But
my entire goal is to die in nature somewhere, because that's at least like feels like natural. It feels like home, right? Like to be out doing exactly what I want to do at exactly.
As long as we don't fall off a cliff or something.
As long as it's fast. That's all I pray for.
Exactly. It's horrible, but true.
Yeah, it is horrible, but true. Hard to think about that. I think the closest I've come on my experiences is we were climbing Mount Elbrus, which is in Russia. It's Russia's highest mountain. It's about 18,000 feet. about 6,000 meters, around the same size as Kili, but totally different. Also a dormant volcano, but surrounded. It's very, very pretty. And back in the day when you could go to Russia and have fun and post it on your social media and make TV shows, not anymore. Those days are long gone. But we got caught. We were hiking up. It's funny. We were hiking up the backside of the mountain, and yeah, we just got caught in this like electrical storm. So this cloud came in, and it was just like lightning and static electricity.
And there was nowhere to hide?
And there was nowhere to hide, and we were covered in metal. Because you can imagine, like, yeah, because we had harnesses on with clips and ice axes and crampons, like metal cleats on our shoes so we could keep the grip. And yeah, we were just covered in metal. And then this like electrical storm just kind of came in out of nowhere. And it was terrifying. We had to like take off our crampons, throw our ice axes to the ground, take off and kind of like slide down as quickly as we could, and it was scary because our guides were scared, like because you rely on your guide to tell you like what's okay and what's not okay, and that definitely was not okay, and that was kind of terrifying.
And so you had to leave all your gear?
Yeah, we had to go back up the next day to get it. Yeah,
Got it.
Yeah, it was a 1-day delay on the trip. Yeah, but worth it, just to try to be safe. But that was because it was funny because like you could feel the static electricity like on all your hair and things like that, and you're just like, someone's going to get hit by lightning.
So did you see the lightning strike the ground then?
We didn't see the lightning strike the ground, but we could see lightning in the clouds like further away, because it kind of came around us, but then there would be these times where it would like open and we could see a couple miles and we could see lightning kind of in the cloud but further away, and we're like, oh well, how long is that until that's on top of us?
How scary.
Yeah, I don't want to be struck by lightning.
No, nature can switch on you any minute.
I always say nature always wins. So
it does.
Yeah, so stop trying to win. Stop trying to control nature. Just bend to it, and you'll survive longer, probably.
Probably.
No, that's disclaimer. Maybe. Yeah. That's great. So is there anything else you want to chat about? I mean, I feel like we've had a great conversation.
No, I'm having a great time. I do want to, I'd like to pick your brain more, maybe reach out to you in the future about just some of the other things that you've done. I'm going to watch some of your episodes that you've had.
I love talking about myself, so anytime. I set this whole thing up just so I could chat about to other people, but also just chat about all my crazy adventures around the world too.
That's great.
Yeah. I mean, have you seen anything that I've done, or do you have any questions?
I just looked up I wish I did. I looked up your bio, and I was looking up all the different things that you've done, and I thought, oh my God, this guy's really, like, he's a real professional, and look at everything he's done. So I am going to, now that I have all that information, I'll look it up. I don't know why I didn't before.
You know what? It's funny. I'll tell you this. And as a therapist, you might have some take on this. So I moved to China when I was 22. So I wasn't good enough to play professional basketball. So I decided like I'm going to radically change my life.
Oh.
Yeah, and I didn't want to like stay with all my friends and that.
Right when you graduated college.
Right when I graduated college, yeah.
Okay.
Because I just felt like I didn't want to stay around home and be like around all the same friends and where we would just talk about our basketball days all the time, and those were good memories, but I needed to build something new, right? So I moved to China when I was 22, and I didn't know anyone in China. I didn't speak Chinese, but I knew I could just get a job teaching English, so I knew I'd be fine. And what happened to me is I started, when you grow up as a high level athlete, you don't grow up as a particularly well-rounded person. Like you train for 4 or 5 hours a day. I was playing on 2 teams for much of my career, a high school team and then a select team, like a rep team. And then in university, I played college basketball, which takes over your whole life. But I had no time for any other hobbies or activities. And then when I went to China, I had given up on my basketball career. I couldn't take it any further. And then all of a sudden, like, everything interested me. And it was just like this whole new version of myself like blossomed. And again, it was all about throwing myself, into total discomfort, living in a country with a different way of life, different society, different culture, different language, different food. Everything was uncomfortable for the first few months, but I kind of thrived on it. I loved learning about that. I always tell people like, and as a therapist, I'm curious to hear your take on this. Like, we are all kind of schizophrenic in our own way. Like, we all have different versions of ourselves. Like today, I'm a different version of myself for you. We're having a podcast. In China, I was a different version of myself because everything was new and I was learning. and I was totally engaged in trying to understand, this new way of life that I was being. And then in Toronto with my high school basketball buddies and my college basketball buddies, like I'm another person, right? So we're all different people depending on the environment we're in. And I just loved the version of myself that was me in China. So I stayed.
And then how was it when you came back to live, though? Because you left that version behind you, or did you went to seek different adventures? That's how you were still creating that sense of you.
Yeah.
By going to other places.
Yeah, I think so. What happened to me was like I started one of the hobbies or things that I picked up along the way, which I really loved, was photography and writing. So I started writing and traveling all around China by myself, telling people all these amazing places I was going. I started working for local magazines in China, and then I started working with Asian magazines in Hong Kong and Singapore, and then I started working with the New York Times.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, so I spent 10 years working for like New York Times, Time, Newsweek. I was a freelancer for all these people, but I had the chance to work for all of them. And it was great. I was constantly like telling stories, meeting inspiring people. Some of the stories we did were horrible. Some of the stories we did were really uplifting and beautiful. It was a spectrum, but every day it was kind of a different energy and a different kind of adventure. But the reason how I got into the hiking and climbing was I was living in Shanghai, and it was like a city of 30 million people. And I was just feeling like suffocated.
Yes.
And it was really intense. And I started going out into Tibet and going out into really remote parts of China with one of my good friends, Brandon. And we would go out and do these 10, 12, 14-day hikes through Tibet, through the mountains and stuff like that. And just bathing in, glacial rivers. Yeah.
That sounds great.
And then when my career in print media finished, I was just like, I just want to make television shows about doing this. And I was like, how do I do that? And then I had to self-fund the first one and got the concept down, and then I just kind of carried it through and fell in love with it. And then it was just replacing that energy.
Right. So you still created. So what you had in China at 22 and for however long you stayed there, you kept recreating in new places.
Yeah. And it just became a wild ride. And then I was able to share that with a global audience, which was amazing. And then, of course, you're getting a lot of positive feedback, and some people call you an asshole, but most people like it. So you keep doing it, right? And, you're able to make a living from it. And it was a wild ride for a long time. And now we're just kind of dipping our toes back into this space. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. And maybe that's what happened with me. We've always, we go to Costa Rica. We've been going to Costa Rica for, 32 years. We have a place there, but it's, we've had it forever, for over 20 years. But I wanted to start doing more, not just Costa Rica. Well, we did surf in Fiji, which was amazing. But I think I just was looking for something else, and that long trip, like you said, it does something to you to where you want to be able to experience something similar or something new, but it brings back those feelings.
Yeah. I tell you, there's definitely like seriously addictive endorphins released when we do go out of our comfort zone and have those new experiences in new countries. That's why everyone's addicted to traveling, because that's the version of themselves they all like. They hate who they are working 9 to 5 in the office and going to the gym at 7 p.m. at night after a terrible day at work and sweating for an hour so they don't get fat. Like we're all living that rat race, right? Yeah. So of course everyone feels great when they go to Bali or Greece or parts of Africa where they can learn something new and engage their mind in a different way. And that's why we're all addicted to traveling, and social media has just completely enhanced that. But there's a real core root to that that's ingrained in our psychology of learning new things and being in new places that is supremely attractive.
But also, Ryan, there's a difference between going on a 4-week cruise through the Mediterranean than what we do and travel and like really experience the culture and the land, which, I'm not saying that cruising is bad.
Oh, no, it's bad. It's terrible. Let's be honest. No, but
for some people, they really love it. And that's great because they get to experience it in some way. But for me, it's just being out there in nature and experiencing it that way that that's what I guess I need.
Yeah. And it's funny that it took you, quite a while to get there.
It is kind of strange, isn't it?
Because it seems like it's been hiding, latent or dormant inside you for a long time.
Yeah. And it was just released. Watch out.
Watch out. Coming to you soon. No, it's interesting. It's nice. I actually think like these experiences abroad and doing these kind of really intense journeys is going to change, how you see how you want to live whatever is left in this life, and also change the way you interact with absolutely everyone in your day-to-day life.
And I think something that you touched on earlier was it's my relationship with my grandkids. I mean, this is, backpacking and hiking with them. I take my husband and the 2 kids and our dog. We'll take them on shorter hikes, but they're good hikes, But the older one, I know he loves it. I know it comes from within, and he's done, we've camped twice at Whitney Portal Campground there. It's a beautiful campground. And we've hiked to Lone Pine Lake, which is we camped at 8,000 feet, hiked 3 miles to Lone Pine Lake straight up, which brings us to 10,000 feet.
Yeah, that's no small distance.
No,
Yeah.
and then back down again, and he's done it twice.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited to take him and open him up to this whole world of backpacking and adventureness.
Yeah, no, that would be a great, that'd be a great legacy to inspire in him, right?
I think so.
Yeah, that's wild.
I hope his parents think so.
That's another question entirely. It's funny, like when I went to China my first time, my parents were very uncertain about.
Well, you're only 22. I mean,
but that's the best time to fuck up and have to come home.
True.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, because you always come home.
You can. Yeah, I mean, as long as your parents, are as long as you keep that relationship strong. But I think people are totally paranoid or totally afraid to kind of just go out and make really big mistakes. But I was like, if you're gonna do it when you're 22. Like I had no debt. I was very lucky with my college education, but I had no debt. I had no family. I had no assets. I had no money. So
it's a perfect time.
Yeah. Why not be wild and free and try something crazy? And if it sticks, it sticks. And if it doesn't, you can always come back and do what you were, going to do what everyone else was doing.
And I also think, the people like in my book or that I work with who are just, they're stuck. They're stuck. They can't move forward with their life. And then once you do move forward, it's a whole new world, to get yourself unstuck.
And it's addictive. All those steps you have to take become really addictive,
Well, I've got that personality.
Yes. But again, it's those endorphins that are released when you are doing something new, and when you're learning something new, and that if it can really carry you into powerful places. It can also lead to some depression. I've definitely had that too, where I would go out. I mean, I'm curious, when you did your bicycle ride across the United States, even though you were mauled by dogs right at the end, but did you feel a huge kind of adrenaline deficiency when you came off that trip, and were you kind of depressed after?
It was hard.
Yeah.
It was hard coming back because I got to do something I love to do. I got to wake up in the morning and exercise all day long, and not only that, but just see the whole United States in a different way and meet people. The people were so nice. I know people say bad things about Texas, but I have to say the people in Texas were the nicest to me. When I was on my bike, a car passing by or a truck, they would say, "Do you have enough water? Do you need any water?" And I'd look around and say, "Are you talking to me? Because this has never happened in California."
Yes.
But I think it was hard for me to come back and then get back. And maybe that's why I started booking all these trips.
I completely 100% can tell you that is exactly why. Yeah. This is your new addiction. This is your new addiction.
It is.
Yeah. And it's amazing. And because I did these big motorcycle trips for like 60 days with my brother, and obviously getting up, getting on the motorcycle, seeing a country, stopping gas stations, meeting people along the way. It is completely addictive, and it's so freeing. And again, you're learning stuff every day, and maybe you're almost dying a few times. In India, it was very, very difficult, but it's adrenaline, it's addiction, and then when you're done, all you want to do is get back out and do it again.
Yeah, like what's next?
Yeah, and that's why you're booking all these trips. Absolutely.
Well, and yeah, so I'm excited though. I'm excited about it. We'll see. I'm excited about all of it.
Yeah, I'm really keen to see how these trips change the way you think about your practice too.
I'll let you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because then it's like you're bringing those experiences, because obviously those experiences are very fulfilling for yourself. That's why we do them. But I'm curious to see how it affects the community around you, not only your family and friends, but also, the patients that you have to interact with every day. Because they might be able to sense something different in you easier than you can sense something in you.
We might ask them that. Now that you brought it up, I'm going to ask them. The ones, most of my clients that I see now, I've been with a while because I am personally not taking new clients at this time, but the company is, and it's only because I have all these trip plans. How can I take new clients? That wouldn't be fair either.
Right.
So I will ask them if they've noticed a difference. Maybe I'll wait till after this long journey.
After 500 miles, yeah.
Yes. Ask if they've noticed a difference.
Come back like just thin and dehydrated and a shadow of your former self and be like, do I look any different? Or do I sound any different? Or has anything changed? I mean, because we give off so much communication non-verbally, right?
Correct.
And I think that's where a lot of these experiences that we do on the side, like your trip to Kilimanjaro and your trek, like all of this changes the way we communicate with people non-verbally, because we don't just talk about ourselves all the time, but people can sense we're confident. You know, we know how to deal with crisis. Like there's crisis happen all the time. 58 days on a bicycle across the United States. Like, you know, we had flat tires. Ooh, like, you know, I was attacked by dogs. I still made it, right?
Or pouring rain or lightning or thunder or whatever it is.
Yeah. So you end up kind of learning how to roll with the punches, and then nothing bothers you. And then you come back into society and you're like, well, fuck, nothing bothers me. Like this living in LA is fucking easy. Like, you know, it's not like climbing mountains. So it totally changes the way, even I think it subconsciously even changes the way we go about our daily lives.
Well, I know Cuba did.
Yeah.
I know Cuba did. And seeing how the people there live and either want to leave or thinking that somebody's going to come and save them.
Yeah. Sitting there and hoping someone's going to come and save you is probably a terrible feeling.
I know.
Because nothing happens unless you get up and do it yourself. I think that's the moral of every story.
And what happens if they do? I mean, they'll probably get thrown in jail.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea.
I mean, they can't even talk about it on the sidewalk, so.
Well, interesting. Maybe a storm brewing.
Maybe.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you so much for swinging by. It's been wonderful.
It's been great.
Yeah.
Really, really fun.
And I wish you the best of luck in your practice and with your family, and of course for your epic adventures that are coming soon. I thought we might talk a lot about you and mental health, but I ended up just talking about how much we love traveling.
I know. I hope that's okay.
I think it is. As long as we're happy about it, and your trips this year, I'm very envious about. They both sound amazing. So I wish you the best of luck. And maybe after you've had these summer trips, you can come back and we can talk about.
I'd love to talk with you about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to see just psychologically what happened to you on this 500-meter trek through Europe. That's going to be a big one.
500 meters.
500 miles, sorry.
Yes. I don't know. You know, when I did Ironman Canada, I remember we were doing the marathon part and I was yelling out, how much farther? And they told me in meters. I'm like, miles.
Yeah. The United States has severely isolated itself with the metric system.
I know.
And it's because you start traveling around the rest of the world and everyone's using kilometers and meters.
I can kind of figure it out because I know that from my races, you know, how long is a 10K? A 10K is 6.2 miles. Okay, so if it's 20 kilometers, all I have to do is add up to.
It gets easier the more you practice it. But yeah, I know. It's funny that the rest of the world does everything completely differently than here.
That's us.
It's in a nutshell. Well, look, really wonderful to meet you, and thank you so much for swinging by.
Keep in touch.
Yeah,
I'd like that.
I would like that too. Okay, so now we can go here, and now we can go wide, and I shake your hand.
Oh.
Wonderful to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks for swinging by.